Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I seriously can't believe this is happening to me. Just yesterday morning, everything was perfectly normal. My annoying alarm blared at 6 a.m. sharp, jolting me out of a deep sleep. After hitting snooze about 5 times, I finally dragged myself out of bed and got ready in a total morning zombie mode. I threw on whatever clothes I found scattered on my bedroom floor. An old band t-shirt, some ripped jeans, and a flannel shirt. I ran a brush through my messy hair once or twice, splashed some water on my face, and deemed my appearance acceptable for school. Downstairs, I could hear my dad yelling that I better get moving or I'd miss the bus. I shoved my textbooks haphazardly into my backpack, not caring that the pages were getting all bent and crumpled. Breakfast was just a granola bar and soda grabbed on my way out the door. I didn't even bother to check if I had my phone. Clearly, that was a mistake. The bus ride to school was loud and chaotic as usual. Everyone was shouting and laughing, music blaring from phones. I tried to nap a bit since I was still exhausted. At school, the morning dragged on slowly. Mr. Morgan's geometry proofs made my head spin, and by the time I got to English class, I was barely staying awake. We were starting a new book, and I couldn't focus on the first chapter at all. Finally, it was time for lunch. I sat at our usual table where my friends were already gathered. We talked and joked around about our teachers, classes, and all the boring drama at our school. For that brief 45 minutes, I could relax and be myself. I didn't even notice I didn't have my phone until Stacy asked to see a funny meme I'd sent her over the weekend. That's when I realized it wasn't in my pocket. My heart sank as I frantically patted myself down. No phone. I must have left it at home. Now I had no way to entertain myself to make it through the rest of this boring day of school. Stacy offered to let me use her phone if I needed it, but I figured I could manage without it for one day. Oh, how wrong I was about that. The afternoon dragged on even slower than the morning. In anatomy, I couldn't focus on memorizing muscle groups without my phone games to pass the time. I caught myself starting to nod more than once. Finally, the last bell rang and I gathered up my stuff, relieved this day was over. But as I walked down the hall, something weird happened. A group of senior girls I didn't know started loudly whispering and giggling as I passed them. One even shouted "nice selfie" sarcastically at me. I looked down at my outfit and couldn't find anything embarrassing. What was so funny about me? A few more groups of kids snickered as I stopped at my locker. I was really confused and starting to feel uneasy. I rushed out of school as fast as I could. The whole bus ride home, I racked my brain trying to figure out what I could possibly have done to become the butt of some joke, but I came up blank. When I got home, I tossed my backpack on the floor of my messy bedroom and crashed onto my unmade bed, exhausted. That's when I saw an alert pop up on my sister's phone charging on my nightstand. It was a DM from a friend, saying, "Only did you see these pics of your sister?" My heart stopped. Frantically, I grabbed her phone and opened the message. My worst fear was confirmed. It contained the private photos from my phone, the ones meant for no one but me to see. I felt the blood drain from my face. How was this possible? Then it hit me all at once, my missing phone. I must have dropped it at school, and someone had picked it up and started going through it. They sent around personal photos I had taken only for myself. I think I'm going to be sick. I ran to confront my sister, who swore she didn't send the pics out. She seemed genuinely shocked, and I believed her. So it had to be whoever now had my phone. But who? And how much else had they dug through and shared? I tore my room apart searching for my phone with no luck. It must still be at school with some creep who thinks violating my privacy is a fun joke. I felt so angry and panicked. The next morning I got to school early and went right to the principal's office. I told them the whole story and they promised to investigate. But the damage was already done. Over the next few days, everyone at school was whispering about me and giving me dirty looks. Crude names were scribbled on my locker and photos were pinned up in the bathrooms. I kept my head down, utterly humiliated even though I did nothing wrong. A week later, the principal called me in and told me they identified the guy who took my phone. some junior I've never even spoken to before. He claimed it was just a dumb prank, but this was my life he was messing with. The principal said he'd be suspended but couldn't erase what was out there. I'm trying to get through this nightmare one day at a time, but I feel so violated and embarrassed even though I know I shouldn't. I didn't do anything wrong. It's my body and my choice. But having my personal stuff spread around the whole school without my consent makes me feel sick. I've learned the hard way to guard my phone closely, and the importance of trusting who you share information with, even in private messages. I'm hopeful people will forget about this soon, but the scars from having my privacy betrayed like this run deep. I just have to stay strong and keep my head high. This too shall pass eventually, I hope. When Mr. Johnson, my favorite history teacher, went on unexpected medical leave halfway through my sophomore year, we were all really bummed. Mr. Johnson was the kind of passionate, engaging teacher who made history truly come alive. His lectures were full of vivid stories and details that transported us back in time. He organized creative group projects, simulations, and even occasional role-playing activities that helped us envision life during different historical eras, like colonial times, the civil rights movement, or ancient Rome. Mr. Johnson had a natural talent for bringing dry historical facts to life in a way that was interesting, memorable, and often fun too. His passion and energy for the subject were contagious. Students who claimed they hated history before walking in his class were soon actively participating and eager to learn more. The new long-term substitute teacher who took his place seemed nice enough at first. Mr. Hayes was young, probably in his late 20s, and tried hard to keep class interesting in Mr. Johnson's absence. He used multimedia presentations with videos and music from different time periods to supplement the textbook readings. This provided a change of pace from constant lecturing, which we appreciated. However, the lessons didn't always go smoothly. Sometimes the videos or soundtracks didn't work properly due to technical glitches. When this happened, Mr. Hayes would laugh it off and improvise, asking us questions about the era to fill time as he tried to fix the issues. While he wasn't a naturally gifted lecturer like Mr. Johnson, Mr. Hayes' efforts to engage us were noticeable. He seemed knowledgeable enough about history and assigned thoughtful essay prompts for our unit tests that challenged us to apply what we had learned. Some of the assignments felt like busy work just to keep us occupied, but overall, Mr. Hayes put in a solid effort under tough circumstances. Considering he was tasked with temporarily replacing a beloved teacher, we felt he handled the situation pretty well in those early weeks. However, about a month into Mr. Hayes' stint, some warning signs started to emerge. I first noticed a shift one morning when I was chatting with my friend Julia before class as Mr. Hayes set up that day's lesson. We were just making small talk about our weekends while other students socialized around us. Suddenly, I caught Mr. Hayes looking over at us with an odd expression. His friendly smile had vanished, replaced by a cold, narrow-eyed gaze. It gave me chills down my spine. I quickly pointed it out to Julia, who agreed the glare seemed weirdly angry and creepy. We promptly took our seats and avoided eye contact with Mr. Hayes for the rest of class. I barely paid attention to his lecture, preoccupied by the uneasy feeling from that glare. A few days later, the incident repeated when Mr. Hayes called me out in class for having my cell phone out. I tried explaining I was just quickly responding to an important text from my mom, not lazily browsing social media or anything. But Mr. Hayes aggressively lectured me in front of everyone, even threatening to send me to the principal's office if he saw my phone again. His tone was stern and his glare harsh as I sat there stunned, fighting back tears and humiliation. It felt like an extreme overreaction to a harmless offense. After class, I told some friends about what happened and learned they'd faced similar scoldings or criticisms from Mr. Hayes lately over minor issues. Mild-mannered Alicia forgot her textbook one day and said Mr. Hayes berated her harshly, accusing her of being irresponsible. Even easygoing Nathan got snapped at when asking an innocent question about that day's assignment. It was definitely a shift from Mr. Hayes' initial patient demeanor. Now he seemed quick to anger and almost eager to publicly reprimand students. We speculated about why his personality had changed so drastically. Had we done something to provoke his stern authoritarian approach, or was this who he truly was under the friendly facade? The most sinister theory floated was that Mr. Hayes targeted kids who questioned his authority or competence as the substitute, like Julia, now whispering instead of paying full attention. It was an unsettling thought. That night, I decided to investigate Mr. Hayes online, searching his name along with teacher to see if I could find any clues about his past positions. I discovered a series of articles about an educator with the same name who had recently resigned from a middle school one county over. The articles reference unspecified inappropriate conduct by this teacher that had led to multiple parental and student complaints. I delved deeper, uncovering social media posts alluding to more details. Students accusing him of frequently losing his temper and making inappropriate threatening remarks to kids who misbehaved only slightly. Some also alleged he inappropriately overshared private details about his dating life, definitely crossing professional boundaries. Could this be the same Mr. Hayes now teaching at our school? It seemed unlikely to be sheer coincidence. I called my friend Julia to discuss what I had found. She did her own digging and found even more concerning accusations about the teacher with the same name at that middle school. Disturbed, we decided we needed to report this information to our principal. The next morning, Julia and I, along with two other friends who had experienced issues with Mr. Hayes, requested a meeting with Principal Collins. Sitting in her office, we shared the troubling discoveries about Mr. Hayes' alleged past misconduct. We made it clear we weren't jumping to conclusions or accusing him of anything specific, only raising valid questions and concerns about what we had uncovered. Principal Collins thanked us for coming forward and assured she would look into the matter discreetly. I don't know exactly what actions she took after our meeting, but Mr. Hayes was absent for over a week following our talk. When Mr. Hayes returned, he was a totally different teacher, almost unrecognizable from the confident, charismatic substitute who first appeared in our class. He kept his head down, sticking tightly to the syllabus and avoiding any personal remarks or interactions with students. His lectures were flat and hurried, eyes glued to his notes rather than engaging with us. He darted out of the room as soon as each class ended. It was almost sad seeing the subdued, diminished version of the teacher who initially worked so hard to fill Mr. Johnson's shoes. But it was a relief, too, removing the tension that accompanied Mr. Hayes' later volatile personality. A few weeks later, our principal happily announced Mr. Johnson would be back full-time, having made excellent progress recovering from his medical issues. It started out innocently enough. I'd come to school and find a flower or chocolate sitting on my desk, tied with a ribbon. Scribbled on the tag were sweet words: "You're beautiful. Your smile makes my day. Can't stop thinking about you." At first it felt nice, like someone had a little crush on me. I'd pick up the gifts excitedly and tell my friends about my secret admirer. We'd giggle together, wondering who it could be. This went on for a few weeks. Every few days I'd find something new left just for me. I suspected a boy named Ryan who sat behind me in history class. Sometimes I thought I noticed him looking over at me, but whenever I turned around he quickly averted his gaze. It was kind of thrilling to imagine he was leaving me these thoughtful gifts. But then the presents started to change. Instead of chocolates, I found a sterling silver bracelet in my locker one morning. It must have been expensive and seemed like too much for just a crush. The notes changed too, becoming more intense and personal. "I can't stop thinking about you all day and night," one said. Another described my lips, my legs, my body in a way that made me uncomfortable. I didn't show these new notes to my friends anymore. The secrecy that had been exciting now felt ominous. I considered reporting it, but had no idea who was leaving the gifts. The compliments had turned creepy, but I tried to convince myself this person just had an innocent crush and didn't mean harm. Then I found a note in my desk containing a lock of hair bound in ribbon like the other gifts. But it wasn't just any lock of hair. It was long and silky jet black hair. My hair. I felt sick, violated by the thought that someone had cut a piece of my hair without my knowing. At this point I was scared and decided to come forward. But over the next week, strange things started happening to dissuade me. I felt eyes on me walking between classes. I heard footsteps echoing behind me when I was alone. One night, pulling in my driveway after a late study group, an unfamiliar car sat idling down the street. A feeling of being watched and followed started to take over my life. The anonymous gifts continued too, each more disturbing than the last. A tube of lipstick with an imprint of lips in my locker still wet. A note on my pillow, someone. Had been in my bedroom. Terrifying words carved into my desk. all classic signs of a stalker. I was paralyzed, not knowing who I could trust. I stopped hanging out with friends or going out after school, afraid to leave the house alone. I was jittery and anxious, my stalker's unseen presence everywhere. At night, panic attacks kept me from sleeping. This went on for several weeks. My fear grew, manifesting in constant nausea and migraines. I struggled in school as I couldn't concentrate. I became utterly withdrawn, both afraid of others and afraid to be alone. The final straw came when I opened my locker one morning to find Polaroids. Pictures of me getting dressed in my bedroom, taken from outside my window. Crude messages were scrawled on them about wanting to own me. I felt violated to my core and resolved to finally speak out. I told my parents everything. We went straight to the police, who launched an investigation. They dusted for prints, questioned potential suspects at school, and started driving by our house periodically to monitor for stalkers. No arrests were made, but it seemed the scrutiny alone made my harasser back off. The horrible invasion stopped as quickly as it started. To this day, I still struggle with the residual trauma, anxiety, depression, trouble trusting people or feeling safe, but I refuse to remain a victim. Speaking out remains the hardest yet most empowering thing I've done. And I'm forever grateful for the good people, family, true friends, authorities, who supported me through that nightmare and helped start putting the pieces back together. There are still hard days, but I'm healing a little more each one. I come to my locker in the morning and find a little surprise waiting. A flower, a chocolate, a sweet handwritten note. I had no idea who they were from, but it felt kind of nice to think someone might have a little crush on me. The notes were always thoughtful, saying how beautiful or smart I was, how this person noticed me in class or at lunch. Specific compliments like, "You have the most gorgeous green eyes," or "I can't stop staring at your perfect smile," made me blush. It really boosted my shy sophomore self's confidence to think someone saw me that way. This went on for a couple months. Maybe 2 or 3 notes or small gifts each week. I eagerly tell my best friends Sarah and Lee about the latest one when we met before homeroom most mornings. We'd have fun gossiping and giggling together, analyzing each gift and note to try and figure out who my secret admirer might be. I had a couple suspects in mind. There was Ryan, the cute boy who sat behind me in history class. He was smart and on the soccer team, with these dreamy blue eyes and dimples when he smiled. Or maybe it was Matt, that artsy junior who was always sketching in the courtyard at lunch. He had shaggy brown hair and played guitar. I secretly hoped it might be one of them. But then things started to change around winter break. The notes became more intense, saying how this person couldn't stop thinking about me, how I occupied their every waking thought. The compliments also turned more personal, with comments about my body or appearance that made me feel uncomfortable. "You have such gorgeous legs in that short skirt," one note read. Another said, "I love watching you walk down the hall. I wish I could reach out and touch you." These kinds of notes felt inappropriate and wrong, not flattering. I no longer rushed to open the latest note with excitement. Instead, I felt embarrassed and uneasy. The small gifts became stranger too. A little lock of hair, a used lipstick with an imprint of lips in a dark plum shade I'd never wear. These seemed more like creepy tokens of obsession than sweet gifts of admiration. I stopped telling Sarah and Lee about the notes at all after that, feeling ashamed that I had somehow provoked this unwanted attention. Things got worse in the new year. One day I found an envelope slipped through the vent of my locker that said, "I'm always watching you. Always." I got scared and ripped it up in panic, my hands shaking. I looked around the crowded hallway, paranoid that my stalker was there somewhere blended in among all the faces. I felt exposed, like intense unseen eyes were on me even now. After that, I started noticing a nondescript dark set and parked down the street from my house many nights. One morning, I found a photo of my bedroom window slipped under the front door. Someone had been right there outside watching me while I slept. Another day, I came home to find a note placed right on my pillow. Someone had broken in and been in my room while I was at school. I was terrified but told no one about it, thinking I could handle the situation on my own. I was so wrong. At school, I now felt eyes following me everywhere. I heard footsteps right behind me when I was walking alone in the hallways between classes. I quickly turned around, only to find no one there. I became hyper-vigilant and paranoid. Worst of all, I started feeling like every person was a potential suspect, even my closest friends. What if Sarah or Lee were just playing some cruel practical joke on me? Or my lab partner, Matt, who had been acting a little weird lately, standing close to me during chemistry experiments. I withdrew from everyone socially, too afraid to go out anymore on weekends. This nightmare went on for several miserable weeks. I became a shell of myself, anxious, sleep-deprived, withdrawn. I hardly slept and couldn't focus on schoolwork. I was jumpy all the time, paranoid that some unseen predator was watching my every move. I lost weight rapidly, dark circles formed under my eyes. I felt unsafe everywhere, even in my own home. The final breaking point came when I found a deeply disturbing note in my backpack after math class. It described wanting to keep me locked away from everyone else forever, as this person's most prized possession. I want to chain you up, kiss every inch of your perfect body, and make you mine, it said. I was shaken to my core. This was no longer just a harmless high school crush. This was a full-blown stalker who saw me as an object to be captured and possessed. I broke down and told my parents everything that night. We went right to the police station to file a report and get a restraining order. An investigation began, but there were no security cameras at school and no fingerprints or conclusive evidence for them to analyze. However, the increased police presence patrolling the school grounds alone seemed to deter my stalker. The horrible notes and gifts stopped arriving after that. I was assigned a guidance counselor to meet with weekly, who helped me process the trauma of what I had been through. I remained fearful and withdrawn for the rest of that school year, but tried to find solace in family and my true, trusted friends. I learned the hard way that admiration can quickly spiral into dark obsession. Now I am much more wary of accepting compliments or gifts from admirers, preferring to really know someone first. The identity of my stalker remains a mystery to this day, one that still makes me uneasy, but I refuse to let that experience control my life and rob me of my freedom anymore. I won't be made a powerless victim again. This chilling ordeal made me stronger, more cautious, and appreciative of those who truly care about me, not just admire me from afar. I survived. When we first noticed the cameras, we thought they were just a new security measure. Our school had been talking about upgrading their systems, so it made sense that they'd add cameras in some of the lesser-used hallways and stairwells. At first, it was easy to ignore them. So what if they wanted to monitor the back corridors that no one really walked through anyway? But then we started hearing disturbing rumors that the footage was being used for more than just watching for vandals or kids sneaking out of study hall. Whispers circulated about staff reviewing tapes and picking out moments to shame or blackmail students. Things they'd want to keep secret being seen by the wrong eyes. It sounded far-fetched, but the unease remained. My friends and I didn't really know what to think. We wanted to give the school the benefit of the doubt, but the more we thought about it, the more we realized we actually had no idea what the administration did with the recordings. The uncertainty gnawed at us day after day. Finally, a group of us, myself, my best friend Sam, a tech genius kid named Jake, and a few other classmates we trusted, decided we had to find out the truth. If the footage was benign, we could rest easy. But if something more sinister was going on, we had to expose it. We had a secret meeting in the band room after school one day to come up with a plan. Jake said he could disable the live feed to the security office temporarily so we could sneak in unnoticed. Sam and I volunteered to go in wearing maintenance uniforms as disguises. The rest of the group would stand watch outside. When the day came, we were terrified but determined. Jake worked his magic, cutting the video feed right on schedule. Sam and I hurried into the office, our hearts pounding. We plugged the thumb drive Jake had given us into the main computer and began downloading footage. The files were heavily encrypted, but Jake's program worked fast. We watched in horror as the clips came up one after another. Hours and hours of footage of girls in the locker room, clearly from a hidden camera in the vents. Students kissing in empty classrooms or passing a joint behind the gym when they thought no one could see. Innocent moments that should have remained private. It was clear this went way beyond normal security monitoring. This was something far more insidious. Someone had a voyeuristic interest in the most intimate details of teen lives. The realization made my skin crawl. Who was watching this? Why? How were they using it? We nearly jumped out of our chairs when the doorknob suddenly rattled. Security, Sam frantically yanked out the thumb drive, and we ducked under the desk, terrified of being caught. But miraculously the guard just jiggled the handle, found it locked, and moved on. Shaken, we snuck back out and reconvened with our friends to share what we found. We knew we couldn't let this continue. This was a gross betrayal of students' trust and privacy. We began carefully sharing the evidence with other classmates we trusted, not telling adults yet for fear of being brushed off. The news spread like wildfire through the school once kids saw the proof. Everybody was appalled. Parents threatened lawsuits. Kids staged protests, refusing to go to class until the cameras were shut down. They taped over the lenses and held signs declaring, "We see you watching." Finally, the administration was forced to act. They claimed no knowledge of the misuse of footage, blaming it on a rogue tech employee who had since been let go. Nonetheless, they removed all the cameras and issued apologies. Police investigated, but no charges were ever filed. After that, we students banded together and refused to let the same thing happen again. Anytime a new policy or change was announced, we scrutinized it thoroughly for potential abuse of power. We circulated petitions against things that seemed invasive and collectively organized when our rights felt threatened. Having a student-led watchdog group empowered us. We realized we didn't have to silently accept whatever the adults dictated. Our voices and well-being mattered too. The camera incident was a painful lesson, but it brought us together and showed us our own strength. High schoolers are so often talked down to and dismissed. This was an awakening that we had real power if we worked as a united front. I'm grateful, my friends, and I followed our instincts to investigate the cameras that day. Who knows how long the secret surveillance would have continued if we'd simply accepted what we were told. The experience taught me to never ignore my gut feeling when something seems wrong. Questioning authority might be uncomfortable, but the consequences of not doing so can be far worse. I'm proud of how we uncovered and stood up to this injustice at our school. It gave me confidence in my own convictions and ability to spark change, even in difficult situations. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.